In Geneva, Switzerland, U.S. and Iranian officials are locked in tense indirect negotiations, with Omani diplomats shuttling messages between the two sides. The world is watching as the outcome could reshape the Middle East and global security. The talks are a last-ditch effort to resolve a dangerous standoff over Iran's nuclear program, which has escalated since last year's brief war with Israel and U.S. airstrikes on Iranian nuclear sites. Iran has since limited cooperation with international inspectors, leaving the world uncertain about its nuclear progress. For the U.S., the goal is to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran. For Iran, it's about escaping crippling sanctions and quelling domestic unrest. The presence of IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi underscores the technical gravity of these talks. Every proposal is fraught with risk. One misstep could trigger disaster. Geneva's quiet neutrality stands in stark contrast to the explosive tensions that brought these adversaries to the table. Both sides are under immense pressure. The U.S. administration must appear tough, while Iran's leaders face mounting protests at home. The stakes could not be higher. Diplomacy or war hangs in the balance. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi arrived in Geneva signaling readiness for a fair deal, but with clear red lines. Iran's top priority is lifting U.S.-led sanctions that have devastated its economy and fueled unrest. Tehran refuses to surrender its nuclear program, insisting on its right to peaceful enrichment as a matter of sovereignty and national pride. Iran is likely offering new limits on enrichment and more inspections in exchange for guaranteed immediate sanctions relief. Deep mistrust lingers after the U.S. withdrawal from the previous nuclear deal. Iran wants assurances this time. The government must balance showing strength to hardliners while addressing economic collapse and public anger. Negotiators face a major hurdle. Iran won't accept a deal that looks like capitulation. The regime frames talks as resistance to foreign domination, but internal pressure is forcing them to the table. Iran seeks a deal that brings economic relief and political victory at home. The outcome will determine whether Iran stabilizes or faces deeper crisis. The Trump administration's demands go far beyond Iran's nuclear program. The U.S. insists on zero uranium enrichment, strict limits on Iran's ballistic missiles, and an end to support for militant groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. Israeli pressure has made missile restrictions a key part of any deal. The U.S. also demands Iran stop its violent crackdown on protesters, linking human rights to any agreement. These sweeping demands touch nearly every aspect of Iran's security and domestic policy. The administration believes only maximum pressure will force real change. This approach makes compromise extremely difficult. The Geneva talks are a test of whether diplomacy can overcome deep mistrust and maximalist positions. As diplomats negotiate, military tensions in the region are escalating. The U.S. has deployed multiple aircraft carriers near Iran, signaling readiness for military action. Iran responds with naval drills in the Strait of Hormuz, threatening global oil flows and showing it won't be intimidated. Recent incidents, like a U.S. jet downing an Iranian drone, highlight how close both sides are to open conflict. Each show of force increases the risk of miscalculation. After last year's war with Israel and U.S. airstrikes, both militaries are on high alert. The U.S. hopes military pressure will force Iranian concessions, but it also fuels Iranian hardliners' calls for nuclear deterrence. The line between warning and war is razor thin. The military standoff is a constant, dangerous backdrop to the Geneva talks. One wrong move could derail diplomacy and ignite a regional war. Beneath the nuclear standoff, Iran faces a brutal human rights crisis. Security forces have violently crushed protests sparked by economic hardship and demands for freedom. Human rights groups report tens of thousands killed. The regime's crackdown has drawn global outrage. The exiled Iranian prince and activists warn the regime is using talks to buy time while repressing dissent. The U.S. has made human rights a central demand, tying any deal to ending the crackdown. This stance puts pressure on U.S. negotiators not to ignore abuses for the sake of a nuclear deal. Iran rejects foreign interference, calling its response to protests an internal matter. For Western leaders, separating nuclear issues from human rights is increasingly difficult. Public opinion in the West demands any agreement address the regime's brutality. The fate of Iran's protesters is now entwined with the outcome of Geneva. In the U.S., the Geneva talks spark fierce debate. Critics warn the administration's hardline approach risks war. Supporters demand a tougher deal than past agreements. For Trump's allies, anything less than total victory is failure. For opponents, diplomacy is the only path to peace. In Iran, Public opinion is divided but hard to measure. Protesters blame the regime for their suffering and fear a deal will only strengthen it. Others, weary of sanctions and hardship, hope for economic relief, even if it means compromise. National pride and distrust of the U.S. run deep, complicating support for any agreement. Both governments face intense scrutiny at home. Any deal will be controversial. The negotiators must balance international demands with volatile domestic politics. The fate of the talks will reverberate far beyond Geneva. The world waits as Geneva talks continue, with three possible outcomes. A breakthrough, though unlikely, would see Iran accept strict nuclear limits and the U.S. lift sanctions, reducing the risk of war. More likely, talks stall but continue, leaving tensions high and the region on edge. The worst-case scenario: negotiations collapse, triggering military escalation and possible war. A U.S.-Iran conflict would devastate the region and global economy. A nuclear-armed Iran could spark a Middle East arms race. The stakes are global. Oil prices, security, and the balance of power hang in the balance. Geneva's quiet rooms hold the fragile hope of peace. The world is watching, hoping diplomacy prevails. The next move could shape history.